Hi there, my name is Tran, and welcome to my web learning series, Animation Teacher. Thanks for checking out the page, and I hope you find this series informative and insightful. I plan on covering animation digital tools, such as Adobe Flash and Toon Boom Harmony. Just a little background about myself. Some of the shows that I've worked on include Arthur. The Cat in the Hat knows a lot about that. Max and Ruby, and also Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Some of the Toon Boom shows I've worked on include Scaredy Squirrel, Nunchucks, Wild Kratts, and currently I'm supervising animation on PBS's new show called Nature Cat. Let's get started with the user interface for Flash. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new comp. Let's start from scratch. So this area here is the stage, and you'll see that it's named Scene 1. Below here we'll have the timeline. Like in other softwares, you'll be able to stack different layers on top of each other. And the hierarchy goes, the top will represent whatever's in the front, and the bottom will represent anything in the back. Along the top here, we'll see the frame count number, and that will correlate to what you see below here. So currently we're on frame 58, and you will see it here. This is the frames per second, and this is the elapsed time. Over here we have the library. Anything that you create should appear here. So if we were to create a symbol, and let me just highlight the circle and hit F8, and that's gonna create a symbol. We'll get into symbol creation more later on, but for now I just wanted to show you how every symbol will appear in your libraries. So we named the symbol circle, and it'll appear as such in the library. The next thing we'll look at is the properties. So properties will illustrate what you click on. So in this case we have the circle symbol that we just created. You'll see that it was created as a graphic as opposed to a movie clip or a button. We'll talk about those options later on. In addition, in the instance, you'll see that it's named circle. You'll see that under looping we have three options. The first one is playing in loop, which will show the amount of drawings in the instances multiple times. Play once, it'll show the instances just once. And single frame, which is what we normally use, it'll just leave it at that one frame. Over on the right side here we have various tools, and each one of these tools below this line here will activate options in the property box. So for example, if you click the pen tool, it'll give you the options of the color stroke. It'll also allow you to change the size of the stroke and the style of the stroke, and some various other options here on the cap and the joint and miter as well. Text tool, this is the line art tool. This is the square or rectangle tool. The circle tool. The polystar tool, in which basically you can add a bunch of stars or points in a star or points in a polygon. This is your pencil tool, which you can control the line weight as well as the style. The brush tool, the bone deformation tool, which is a cool feature but something we will gloss over because it's rarely ever used in actual quality animation production. This is the paint bucket tool. This is the ink bottle tool, which is painting your lines. This is the eyedropper, eraser, width tool, which is kind of cool. It's borrowed from Harmony, and it allows you to change the taper of your lines. This is the hand tool, which allows you to move around the canvas. This is the zoom tool, and these are the color swatches of your stroke and your fill. You can also access other colors by clicking this color palette. And like Photoshop, you can create gradients, linear, bitmap fills, and we'll go over that later on. This is for your line basically, and this is for your brush. Here we have black and white swatches and swap colors, so you can swap the colors between these two. These are your zoom in, and that pretty much covers what we'll actually use. Now, the next thing that I want to cover are three main things about Flash that you need to understand. The first thing is creating art. So I'm just gonna erase this for now, and we'll start with something new. Okay, so I'm just gonna create a layer and we'll call it shapes. So we're gonna create multiple shapes here. We'll create a rectangle, a circle, and a polystar. So to create a polystar, actually that's a polygon. Under the options box, you can set it to star, and we'll make this a 15-point star. Hit OK, and there's your star. So we'll actually have 4 shapes here. So once we have our 4 shapes, you can click on the shape itself, and what you're going to do next is you're going to create a group, which is Control and G. And I'll create a group here. You can go to shape. I think it's under shape. Ah, here. Control G. So modify group. Oops. Modify groups. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a symbol. So all you do is select your group and hit F8, and that's going to create a symbol which you can name. So in this case, we'll name this square, and you want to make sure it's a graphic under the type, and you can hit OK. And for this group here, as you can see, it's separated for the line. Let's just get rid of the line. We're going to just hit F8 or go to modify and convert to symbol. I'll name this circle. Oh, right, we made a circle earlier. Circle 2. So what's important in naming your items is everything appears in the library. So what I did before was we created a circle. Remember this gray circle? We can actually bring it back into the stage here. My new circle is this circle underscore 2. So it's important to delegate proper naming conventions for each symbol. You never want to name different objects with the same name, because what happens is it'll replace the object. We'll get into that a little more later. So let's create this into a symbol, highlight it, and hit F8. Polygon. And this star. Okay, so the 3 main things that we've done was create a symbol. So if I show you on properties here, if you click it, it'll show you the name of the symbol and what type it is. So this is a type of graphic. If we double click into the symbol, you'll see that we're in a group. This highlighted star is a group. If I double click it again, This is the raw art we originally had. So this would be the bottom of the food chain. This is where it all begins. So just to recap, step one, you create raw art. So that under properties is called a shape. The next thing you want to do is you want to group it. That under properties is called group. And then finally, when you hit F8 with the group selected, it will become a symbol. And under properties, you'll see that it's set to a graphic and the instance name appears here. So it's a star. Another way to tell that you have a symbol is if you double click it, the name will also appear up here. So those are the three main things that you need to understand for layering. So what's nice is afterwards you can highlight it all and go to Modify, Timeline, and Distribute to Layers, or Control-Shift-D. And what that'll do is it'll drop down everything into its own separate layer. Now there are a couple of things that I have to go over in terms of terminology. So when I talk about layers, I basically mean these lines here stacked on top of the timeline. When I talk about the frame count or the frame instance, it's basically whatever frame we are on. So right now we're on frame 13. When I talk about exposure, I just mean how long the time is shown. So for example, if I extend this, it is currently on frame 89. So therefore, all this is exposed 89 frames long. The last term that I want to discuss is basically instances. So when you go within a symbol, this star currently has only one drawing. If you create a new drawing by hitting F6, and let's say we want to rotate and enlarge it, this second frame represents the second instance of our star symbol. The first instance is this, and the second instance is this. So that's what I mean by instances. Now, because we have two instances in here, and currently you'll see under looping it says loop. What'll happen is you'll actually see the first frame and the second frame play in loop. If you set this once again to play once, it will just turn big and stay big. So it'll go from instance 1 to instance 2 and just hold, because that's how many instances we have. The other option under looping is single frame, which is what we want most of our symbols to be on. So I'm just going to highlight everything here, and you'll see here that it says mixed. So all that means is within these symbols there is something broken, and I suspect it's the square. So this here, if I highlight that square outline, it's a shape. So this was basically the level 1 of what we were talking about, the raw art. If you highlight only symbols, you should see only symbols. Whereas if you highlight symbols and raw art, it'll give you a mixed medias under the properties tab. So that'll let you know that you have something other than only symbols. For our instances today, our purposes, I'm just going to delete that raw art. So the next thing I want to talk about are tweens. There are 3 types of tweens that we're going to talk about here. So the first one, let's create one. So to create a tween, you basically designate a starting point and an end point. Somewhere in between your 2 keys here, you just right click it and you can hit motion tween or classic tween. So generally we use classic tween for animation. And that'll create this action here. You can turn on the onion skin options below. There is line onion skin and regular ghosting onion skin, which we'll use for our purposes here. When you create a classic tween, you have the option in your properties tab here to create an ease. So there are two directions for your eases. You can ease out by clicking and dragging to the right, and you can see in the ghosted images everything starts quickly and it slows down. If you reverse it and scroll to the left, it becomes an ease in, and that starts everything slowly and it speeds up at the end. If you decide that somewhere you want to implement a key by hitting F6, what that'll do is kind of mess up your tweens. The first part will maintain the ease that you designated, so in this case an ease in of minus 100. But the second part of your tweens, everything goes back to 0. So please keep that in mind when you're keying in the middle of something you've already designated an ease to. So the next thing I want to show you, I'm just going to hide this layer here by clicking there. Okay. The next thing I want to show you is a shape tween. So shape tweens work with only shapes. When I mean shapes, I mean raw art. So we'll actually have to break this group by hitting Control B or right clicking and hitting break apart. So now it's a complete raw art and it'll say shape up here. If we want to create a tween to 12 frames and change that shape ever so slightly, and like creating other tweens, we're gonna right click between the two keys, and in this instance we're gonna create a shape tween. So you'll see the raw art contort accordingly. Shape tweens don't tend to work all the time, so I wouldn't rely on them too much. What's nice if you get it working is you can actually create eases in them as well. So that's what that looks like. The last one we'll talk about is motion tween. So we'll use this square for an example. What's nice about motion tween is you don't actually have to set a key in order to create a tween. So once you have the symbol selected, you just right click and hit motion tween. If we want the action to take place from frame 1 to frame 26, on frame 26 all you have to do is drag the rectangle and you'll see a train track here. Once you've done that, you can click anywhere in the timeline and activate the properties and set your eases. And you can see the eases happen live here. So that's pretty much the 3 types of eases. What I want to show you guys next is how to create a path of action. All you have to do is right click. Let's use this polygon tool. It won't work with motion tweens, it'll only work with classic tweens. So what you want to do is right click the polygon and go to add motion guide. When you're creating a motion guide, you generally want to use this line tool. So I'm just going to create a simple line tool, and I'm going to draw the start of it on my polygon. And I can create an arc. And on the last frame, I want to connect the end to the tip of the second point. And you have the polygon start at the first tip on frame 1, and on the second tip at frame 44, it'll follow the path of action. What's nice is you can adjust the path of action and your polygon will follow suit. And again, if you click between the two keys, go over to your properties, you can set the ease. And I'll turn on the onion skin so you can see what happens. And that's pretty much it for all our tweens and craziness here. So lastly, I want to touch upon the brush tool and the pencil tool. What I'll do now is I'm just going to delete everything. So when you use a pen tool, it'll automatically smooth everything out. You can control the stroke size, before or after you've drawn it. So that's a handy feature, particularly when you start zooming in and out of the camera and you want to keep everything consistent. Another feature about the pen tool is the fact that you can actually control your nodes much easier. So you'll see that there are probably about 18 points in this sketch here. Whereas if you use the brush tool and you highlighted that, you have points on each side that you have to adjust. And that can get a little tricky. In both cases, if you use the free transform tool, you can manipulate your objects any way you'd like. You can introduce new points and angles by holding down Alt, and you can create curves. So you'll notice, let me zoom in here a little bit more. You'll notice on our arrow key, a curved quarter circle will allow you to move the lines like so. If you hold Alt and you drag, you'll see that that circle-ish will become a right angle. And that'll give you new points. So that's important to know when you're cleaning up your work. The last thing I want to talk about is the pen tool. The pen tool works like Illustrator. If you're comfortable with drawing using Beziers, this is a great option for you to clean up and create artwork. So it works the exact same way as Illustrator, if you're comfortable with that. One more thing I want to touch upon is paint bucket fills. It works the same way as Photoshop. It will paint bucket a contained shape. However, if your line is broken, so let's use the eraser tool here, and we'll create a break. If you try to fill it with the paint bucket tool, it's not going to fill no matter how many times you click. However, if you go further down here, you can select to fill small gaps, medium gaps, or large gaps. So let's test out the small gaps. Nope. Medium gaps, there you go. So those are your paint bucket options. That pretty much does it for the intro to Flash. I hope you enjoyed this video. Our next video will talk about animating symbol animation and creating instances for things like hands and how that works in animation production. Thanks for watching.